Hello, students. We're going back to leisure and sports, and we're going to talk about leisure patterns around the world and spheres of influence and all sorts of neat concepts that have to do with both relaxing and playing sports. And we have a fun little theme because we're not talking about people dying and the world ending and all sorts of mean, nasty stuff this time. All right, definitions. Just in case you don't know, it could become handy because IB might ask you to outline what this means. So leisure is like any activity you do that isn't part of work or school, but the idea is that you're getting pleasure or relaxation from this activity. But technically, like driving home from work is leisure, because you're not actually working. So, it's a kind of weird definition, but I just want to have these there for you. I think probably the one that's the strangest on there is catchment area, which, like, if you have a movie theater, like how many people actually use that movie theater instead of another movie theater is that movie theater's catchment area. It's like the people that are going to use that thing. So, changes in leisure. So these are all general. So you can find countries that go against these rules, but just generally across the world, what people who have more leisure time are people that are in high-income countries or middle-income countries because they have disposable income, or maybe they don't have to work multiple jobs to get by, so they have more leisure time. Generally, men have more leisure time than women. That's mostly due to a lot of countries. Women have chores and housework that is primarily their responsibility. Older people are retired. People are retiring earlier, so that means that they have more leisure time. And people that have technology. So that's not just like, oh, I have a cell phone so I can play Fortnite, but it means like I have a dishwasher and a washing machine and a vacuum cleaner, so like it doesn't take me as long to get through my chores. Or I can work from home because I have a computer and Wi-Fi and all this stuff, so I don't have to travel. I have more time to have at my disposal. All right, but sometimes women aren't the ones that wash the dishes. I will admit that I'm the one that washes the dishes and kind of does the laundry at my house too. Factors that have increased leisure. So similar to what I just said, places that, because wages have gone up, people have more income to spend on leisure, technology cutting time. There's just more leisure activities available to people, like because of globalism, like we kind of have more access to more stuff that we can do that might give us leisure, that might relax us. And more people being self-employed and retiring early. So I have an example here of technology and types of leisure. So Bollywood, which is India's film industry, has taken off, and India actually leads the world in movie attendees. And this is in large part to the not only the growth of this industry, but the growth of a middle class and the wealth people have, that they can go and spend money on movie tickets or have time off to go see movies, and thus the movies get better, which means that more people go see them. And so that middle income country is becoming a hotspot for movies. So if you're in a low income country, you generally have a lot less leisure time. And I think that makes sense, that because of a lack of money, a lack of free time, the need to spend a lot more time doing chores or trying to survive, you don't really have a lot of free time. But also is because they don't have a lot of leisure facilities available to them. Like I looked up, because I love hockey and I'm a nerd, I looked up how many hockey rinks there are in Africa, and there's one. There's one hockey rink, and I believe it was in Kenya. So, if you're like, hey, I saw hockey on TV, it looks awesome, I want to do it, well, there aren't a lot of facilities for you to play hockey. And this goes for a lot of other things too, movie theaters and whatnot. So children in low-income countries, especially the poorest of the poor countries, they have to find leisure through their chores or through their life activities. So playing games while farming or watching animals or going to get water, that sort of thing. When my wife went to Rwanda, it was common for the kids that she was working with for those 2 months that they would create soccer balls out of plastic bags or banana leaves or something and kick around these makeshift soccer balls because they couldn't afford to buy one and really didn't have a lot of access to them. So they just made their own out of what was around. Speaking of sports, yay, leisure with helmets. Usually. All right, this is a confusing slide, I'm sorry. But it's what goes into people participating in sports, not going to see sports, but actually playing sports themselves. So a lot of the same reasons that I gave before for leisure fit for sports. So finances, if you have more money, then generally you are more likely to play sports. So in the US, kids are almost twice as likely to play sports if their family makes over $100,000. And so, that means that maybe they have easier transportation, they can buy equipment for you, they can sign you up to play in club leagues, they can sign you up for ice time. If you're a skater, they can take you to a equestrian center if you want to ride horses. There's just money opens up possibilities. Gender also affects sports participation, not only in numbers, but what sport is chosen. So there's a very interesting chart in the textbook that I didn't copy for you that shows, like in Britain, how over 90% of males, 70%, 90% of football players are male. But then when you go down to like yoga, it's like 20% of yoga participants are male and mostly are female. So there's some things that just lend themselves or historically have been popular with certain genders. It also tied into this is that Muslim women tend to have less ability to sign up to play organized sports than their male counterparts. I remember, I should have looked this up before talking, but I'll try. A couple years ago, I think it was the Iranian women's team was invited to a tournament, and one of their star players couldn't leave the country to go to the tournament because her husband decided he didn't want her to go. But the law said that she couldn't leave if her husband didn't want her to. So, there are rules and social mores that might keep women from playing certain sports or in certain countries not playing sports at all. But not to say that Muslim women don't play sports. Obviously, when you look at our sports teams, they do. There's also a hockey team in Qatar that's an all-female hockey team. And one of their players, Fatima Ali, has come and played with the Washington Capitals some because she's an awesome stick handler. So I'll try to remember to show you a video of her in class. Also, if you can drive to places, you can play sports. Sports go sports. All right. So these sports facilities, leisure facilities, where are they? So the best are going to be in the city, and the worst are going to be on the outside. And there's a lot of terms that try to explain this. So the leisure hierarchy is this idea that there's sort of a leveled system of quality of sports and leisure facilities. So the best are at the top of the hierarchy, the worst are at the bottom. But as you get to the bottom, you also have more of those worst things. I'll explain it as we go along. All right, so an example for Washington, D.C., as you can see, this is mostly for leisure, but if you're going to go to the best restaurants or hotels or the best museums, it's going to be in D.C., not coming out to where I live in Centerville. But if you do live in Centerville, you have lots of different stores and lots of different little restaurants and fast food places, but nothing that's fancy. And then if you go even farther out to Middleburg, they are just like a whole bunch of land, but they do have leisure facilities out there. It's just they're large complexes. There's a huge spa complex called the Salamander Spa that's out there. There are golf courses, equestrian centers. So there's stuff to do out there, but it's very little, and it just fits that geography better. So these facilities, the quality and the size of these leisure facilities are tied to how much it costs to build there and the space you need to be there. So places that are going to make more money and use less land are very good for being in the inner city. So like a luxury hotel is very good for an inner city because people need to use it. You need one plot of land and you can build this tall hotel, and you can make it luxurious because people are going to pay for something luxurious in a city. So places in the city are nicer, but they cost more money. Facilities that have a smaller catchment area, so they serve fewer people, they are going to generally make less money, or they need more land, they tend to be farther out from the city. So I have an example of the movie theaters. So I used to live next to the Hoffman movie theater, which is probably the most amazing theater I've ever been to. And so if you've never been there before, it's just very fancy. It looks very nice on the inside and the outside. There's nice restaurants around it. So it just feels kind of glamorous. Out where I live now, the movie theaters are not very glamorous, but they're movie theaters. They show movies, so, we go to them. But the Hoffman can be fancy and spend all the money making it fancy because they know that people are willing to pay extra and are expecting more when they live in a more of a city atmosphere. Another way of talking about this, instead of just saying like, oh, the best places are in DC, is to think of it more of a decaying thing. That sounds very sad, but these high quality places in the center of the city are going to be there in pretty much every city. But as you move farther out, you're going to see this slow decline in the quality of facilities. So you can think of this in a sports sense of like the Verizon Center or Audi Field or something, or like amazing sports complexes. But they're in the city center because that's where those teams play. That's where all the recreation is. Like Verizon Center is in Chinatown, so quality in the center of the city. Then as you move farther out, there might be other fields that maybe are college fields or high school fields, or maybe public parks or something. So there's like space to play sports, but it's nowhere near as like playing at the Verizon Center or Audi Field. So places that need a ton of land, like they might be farther out, like golf courses, equestrian centers, which is where you ride horses, by the way. Or like huge stadiums like FedEx Field is out in the suburbs. They might choose to be out there because they need a lot of land, but generally you're going to have the best places in the city. This is another way of looking at it. I thought this looked really cool and interesting, and then I started looking at it and it kind of was confusing, and then it became clear again. So if you like this chart, awesome. If you don't, yeah, me neither. But it's trying to show you that in the central area you have these amazing places, and you have a large amount of people in the catchment area because they're willing to drive in to go to those places. Like I'm willing to go drive into the Kennedy Center from Centerville because that's where you're going to see Hamilton or something. So you're willing to do that. But as you move into the suburbs and the fringe, you have a much smaller group of people that are going to go out there. All right, you guys aren't going to drive out to Centerville because we have a Dunkin' Donuts and a Target. Okay, like there's closer places you can go to get to those places. Okay, so they serve a smaller group of people. So then they don't have to be as fancy. Why build a super extra fancy Target when there's like 5 Targets within 20 minutes? Like there's no reason to do that, to make it fancy. All right, so as you move away from a city, generally the catchment area goes down, the quality goes down, but you have you might have more facilities available. So you might have more restaurants, but they're going to be lower quality restaurants. And the amount of the area you need increases. One last thing about sports. So we're also going to talk about why sports can be like an industry, and how those industries are sort of organized. So I'm just teasing that a little bit. But a lot of these hierarchy rules apply to sports as well. Like professional teams normally have very local fan bases, and they're located in large cities. So, people are willing to spend money. There's a lot of people there that spend money, but that whole metro area can become a fan base of that city. But some teams can reach a larger catchment area. They can reach a larger crowd, either because they're really successful. So maybe like the LA Lakers or the Dallas Cowboys or the Yankees might fall into that category. They might be a historic team. So like in hockey, the Montreal Canadiens are like the first hockey team. So they're always going to have diehard fans. The Boston Red Sox, even when they sucked, people went to their games, and they were really bad in the 90s. I lived through those years. But they still had a loyal fan base because they were like a historic team and they were a unique team. Or maybe they're just televised more than other teams. So I know the Atlanta Braves, a lot of people around the country are fans of the Atlanta Braves because they are on TBS all the time, and that's a national station. So people in like Iowa could watch the Atlanta Braves, whereas they could not see Red Sox games, maybe. All right, so that's that. We'll talk about all this stuff in class, and I hope that you think about like examples in this area or places you've been, and like start to think about why are some leisure facilities available here and not there, or like why is it better in these areas than these areas to participate in sports or to go to theaters or whatever, and we'll hash it out. All right, it's been fun.